Global Order, I'm Hindol Sengupta. Abhijit Iyer-Mitra is joining me today. Lots to talk about also today on various things, especially, of course, the imbroglio, as it were, in Canada. Now, one of the things I want to discuss with Abhijit in this particular conversation is really what's going on with Indian diaspora. This is something which is of great interest to me because, after all, a lot of this Khalistani problem is a problem in part of India's diaspora in Canada. I think it's about 50% of Indian diaspora is Sikh, and a percentage of that, I don't know what percentage, is our Khalistani supporters. Now, this is true, of course, about with some Sikhs in America, in the UK, and in various other parts of the world. And of course, we've seen other kind of diasporas from other sort of backgrounds creating other sort of sovereignty problems for India. Now, on one hand, all of this is happening. On the other hand, Indian diaspora is one of the most successful in the world, best integrated, very well educated. And I wonder what's really going on here. And I wonder, to begin with, Abhijit, if you have any thoughts on this.
Um, well, what's going on is basically that Justin Trudeau's in a very tight spot. He's facing a complete collapse of his party. He's facing a collapse of his leadership, and he needed a diversion. His entire life is a saga of diversion. When he's caught doing blackface, it's not his fault, it's society's fault. He's always externalized his problems, right? Never takes responsibility for his own actions. And that's what he's doing here. And, Canada's getting exactly what it deserves because they voted this man in as prime minister.
Bit more complicated because, of course, it's not confined to Canada. We're seeing statements coming out of the UK, which also actually, I remember only a few years ago, the Indian High Commission in the UK being attacked by a combination, as it were, of Khalistanis and Nilpuris of all people in the world. And this sort of, triggering happens again and again in the US. One consulate of India, I think in the West Coast, actually got burned down.
Well, let's leave the US aside for a moment. Let's talk about Canada specifically, because the problem in the US is a slightly different issue out there. With Canada, you see, the problem here is Sikhs going there face the same thing that Italian and Irish migrants did in the 18th and in the 19th century and the turn of the century, right? They're not really considered, they were Catholic and they weren't considered really white or Catholic in that sense, or American in that sense, because, America was a very staunchly Protestant country at one point of time. The other problem is the related problem, when they rock up there, imagine a sweet little country boy from rural Bhatinda who rocks up there. Now, first of all, he is given his migration violating all rules that apply for other communities, English, no crime record, whatever, rocks up there because of a targeted immigration policy. And it is targeted to feed them as, bait to the Gurdwaras, to the radicalized Gurdwaras. Why? Because like the Italian and Irish communities, they used to occupy the lowest menial jobs. They cartelized. They started drug running, gun running, etc., etc. And, the medium of normalization is your culture. And Punjabi pop culture is all about drugs, guns, and rape, etc., which is what is happening out there. The kid goes there, he can't find a job, he's a complete social misfit. He has to depend on the Gurdwara network, he becomes completely beholden to it. And the Gurdwara network, for its part, because they don't really get the law enforced on them, because it's seen as racist. And this is something Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party have done, that anything is cultural relativism. If there's female genital mutilation in some communities, that is also cultural relativism. If there's gang bashing, beating amongst brown communities, that's not really a Canadian problem. That's cultural relativism. So there's no policing that applies to that community. And they provide, strong arm services for political parties on demand. Overwhelmingly liberal, but also to some level to the Conservative Party. Now, recognizing this and the way the entire community can be brought out to vote, because they're all beholden to one. There are actually more Hindus in Canada than there are Sikhs. But see, the Hindus who go there aren't targeted. They actually have to cross the T's and dot the I's and have all their paperwork in order. So what ends up happening is the Hindu community doesn't organize. They aren't cartelized. They aren't, a vote bank in that sense. The Sikhs are. So they're politically very powerful. And they create these sort of legal lacunas for themselves as it keeps going on. Now, the problem with that, of course, is it creates illegality within Canada, which is where, anybody who knows sociology knows that crime is fungible. A weed dealer is not going to say no to cocaine if it comes his way ultimately, because the margins and profit margins there are much higher. Similarly, he's not going to say to gun running because the profit margins there would be significantly higher. So this is what has been happening out there. You've fostered a culture of crime. You're feeding more people into crime. You've crafted a dual immigration policy that is meant to strengthen the criminal hand. And then, when it is those criminals that end up killing people, from the same gang that we have been urging them to act against for the last 7-8 years, they say it's Indian foreign policy, it's Indian collusion, and that the gang we have asked them to take action against is colluding with the enemy. Right?
Yeah, this is very, very funny and at a very darkly humorous at a level, because interestingly, you were talking about cultural relativism. Now, when acts of violence and certain communities have certain quote unquote rituals which cannot be even policed, and yet on the other hand, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who was turned away again and again because he tried to enter with a fake passport, then married some strange woman who had a different husband. And Canadian authorities again and again turned him away, saying this is illegal, signed a paper complaining that his whole family was being tortured in India, which is completely false. He is a great Canadian citizen in the eyes of Justin Trudeau.
Yes, and he gained Canadian citizenship, violating the norms for Canadian citizenship, because once you've made all these fatal errors and illegal immigration and crime, a rap sheet and all of that, you are not eligible for Canadian citizenship. Right. So the way this immigration is fine-tuned is the corruption lies at the party level, where party officials and things like that sign off on these to overrule immigration in that sense. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, for its role, is a complete joke. They were completely involved in a scandal some years back on majorly corruption in, let me just bring that report up. Corruption in RCMP. There are so many scandals here, it's not even funny. I'm going to send you the this thing. There's actually a Wikipedia page about this.
If you can share your screen if you want.
Yeah, let me do that. Okay, look at this. They've had so many controversies. There are thefts. There have been breakings and bombings. There's been illegality. They burn private property down. The Savoy scandal is a particularly famous one because he was found guilty of corruption. Okay. I mean, just look at this. This is so long. Torture, extraordinary rendition. The RCMP bombed some people. RCMP bombed an oil site in Alberta on October 14, 1998, on the instructions of the Alberta Energy Company, and they scapegoated a farmer. This
The
is a
biggest,
chronically corrupt police organization. There's been a pension, they've played around with their own pension funds. This is, I'm just scrolling down, and you can just see what a joke the police is.
Abhijit, I was about to say that one of the big problems of this organization and the Canadian government, one of the most stark, most relevant points, of course, is the hilarious and really dark and sinister, quote unquote, inefficiency in actually being able to hold anyone responsible for the 1985 Air India Kanishka bombing, which was the biggest.
Not only did they not hold anybody responsible, Canadian intelligence knew about the entire plot. This is there in Terry Milevsky's book. There's that CBC report, which I tweeted out, if you remember, 2-3 days back.
Yeah.
His name was Surjan Singh Gill. He was pulled out 2 days before the bombing to avoid implicating him. They then put him into a witness protection program somewhere in London, and he's disappeared since then. And they went on further to destroy all the wiretaps. Now, understanding, destroying wiretaps is not the same as accidentally deleting an email or deleting a document. In those days, wiretaps used to be those very large cassette tapes. We used to have the small ones. They used to have these big rolls, this thing, which would record. You had to put one on one spool and the other on the other spool. The whole thing had to be played and deleted separately. They destroyed several recordings. And how is it that they were able to pick and choose only these particular ones and destroy them? All right. That's a question that needs to be answered. They claim it's negligence, and we all know, given the level to which the RCMP is compromised, the CSIS is compromised, and the way the entire immigration system is compromised for the Khalistanis, this isn't, a one-off incident.
Point out, I think, it would be interesting, and perhaps you could comment on them. Most people don't understand that even though 329 people died in that bombing of the Air India flight, which was the single biggest act of air terror before 9/11 took place in the world, actually nobody has ever been held responsible. Talvinder Singh Parmar, the mastermind behind this act, actually, the Indira Gandhi government had asked Canada to extradite him. They refused. And even today in Gurdwaras in Canada, Talvinder Singh Parmar is the hero, not just in Canada, but in Gurdwaras in the UK too. I mean, this is the background. You mentioned the CSIS. The CSIS, the former head of CSIS, when it came to China, said this is all basically a subject of investigation. When it came to India, said this is evidence and we're going to prosecute, and please waive off the diplomatic immunity. The dichotomy is stark.
It is stark. This is a bit like Pakistan throwing hissy fit. Canada is the new Pakistan. Canada ban gaya Pakistan, right? It's literally like Pakistan saying you need to prosecute and throwing a hissy fit over us not sending somebody over on zero proof, incidentally. Remember, yesterday, Justin Trudeau has admitted there is no evidentiary proof in his words, just intel. His NSA has come out and said there was no Indian political interference. They just wanted to influence the conversation. And in that list that they provided, Hindol, it is truly amazing. I want to show you again some of the things that have, what constitutes according, and by the way, this is prepared by their foreign ministry. I want to show you what constitutes foreign interference according to them, right?
It's a ridiculous list. Please show
a ridiculous list. Okay. So let's do this now. I want you to focus on these tweets. It's right at the end, Annex A. This is what is considered foreign interference.
all of this essentially tweets from Indian journalists. I mean,
now listen to this. Apparently, isolated Canada is misinformation. Canada's furious High Commissioner. By the way, if you remember that clip, that High Commissioner was he pushed aside a correspondent and shut his door. He could have actually harmed him. So he was furious at that point of time.
that little clip, which is very, very a minute long, the fact that ANI put out that clip has been called foreign interference.
Right. And here's the thing. Canadian High Commissioner to India, Cameron Mackay, leaves from MEA headquarters at South Block, New Delhi.
I mean, one is astonished. I mean, what is it? Is it like, is Melanie Johnny really this incompetent? I mean, what is it? Is it lack of education? Is it liberal white privilege?
Well, even the Americans who have dealt with her do not have a very high opinion of her. I believe the last conversation I had with State Department, the word bimbo was used. So, this is one of those things where Canada's getting the leadership it deserves. Canada's getting the leadership it voted for. And best of luck to them.
I mean, Justin Trudeau also seems almost, I mean, it's like frat boys believing that they have conquered the world. I mean, the entire attitude seems really, I don't know, to me, at least to me, with a certain kind of liberal white privilege.
It's, this liberal white privilege, what is it? Because the more privilege you have, the more woke you get. So all your privileges will be excused. Remember when Justin Trudeau was caught blackfacing, his apology was what? He never apologized. His so-called apology was society is responsible for it. We lived in a society that accepted these things, and I was conditioned by society to do this. He blamed society for it. He never took personal responsibility. He never takes personal responsibility. He externalizes everything. If that isn't wokery, and that's what wokery is about, it's never take responsibility. Everything is somebody else's fault. Black people are down because the white man did it to us. What do you do?
I mean, the astonishing thing is that a lot of Indians perhaps don't know this. There is a history to this. Pierre Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's father, had exactly this kind of connections with the Khalistanis.
Exactly right. And in fact, the man who finally got convicted, partially convicted for the Air India bombing, Talvinder Singh Parmar, he was accused of killing in India. There was concrete proof. The dossier was given by Indira Gandhi to Pierre Trudeau. And you know what Pierre Trudeau's excuse for not extraditing Talvinder Singh Parmar was? A man whose extradition could have saved 320 odd lives. His excuse was, you're a Commonwealth country that does not have the Queen as the head of state.
The first time I read this a few years ago, it was the most astonishing thing. What is that?
I don't know. This is what passes off. And mind you, the CBC, Globe and Mail, Toronto Sun, all of them, because they depend on handouts for Justin Trudeau, they'll never question any of this.
It's it's really astonishing. I mean, Pierre Trudeau. This was the history with Pierre Trudeau. Justin Trudeau has continued this. I mean, this is all extremely problematic, Abhijit. Also, the other thing that I feel that we should discuss is where this is going around the world. I mean, similar things are happening or might happen in the UK too. I mean, the UK had to put out two statements. We know that there are gurudwaras in the UK which have a very problematic history. So there is a genuine problem.
You'll see that change. The issue in the UK was an administrative one. It wasn't a political one. Well, it's partially political, but it's administrative because the Khalistan portfolio comes under the Home Office. That's going to be shifted to the under the Foreign Office. That's going to be shifted to the Home Office, which then, there's lots of additional protocols and a much higher security rating and things like that happens. UK hasn't been such a problem. Because, at some level, they're much more professional than the Canadians are in this sense. So, the UK it isn't going to blow up. America is a completely different issue. It's a localized issue in California. And it's very localized only to North California because there is a huge Sikh community around the Sacramento area that migrated out there. And there's also a mixed community of Mexican Sikhs. And if you technically look at it, they put hara dhania in everything. They use a lot of jeera in their cooking, lots of chilies in the cooking, roti, tortilla, around about the same thing. Queso fresco, paneer. There's a lot of similarities in Mexican and Punjabi food. It was a lovely, still is a lovely community, but it's a localized California problem. It isn't a nationwide problem, unlike Canada.
A little bit about going back to Canada about Jagmeet Singh. Now, a lot of people believe that one of the reasons all of this has got triggered so badly is the influence Jagmeet Singh has on Justin Trudeau. Jagmeet Singh, in fact, the party that Jagmeet Singh leads, he's probably the only big Sikh leader in that party. And yet, and I don't think that party overall is a supporter of Khalistan. It is that Jagmeet Singh himself is a supporter of Khalistan. India today had that story of Jagmeet Singh's, rather sad past. I believe he was sexually abused as a child and so on and so forth. But Jagmeet Singh also seems to be a very problematic character. I mean, there are videos of him that have surfaced, essentially him calling for violence in India in the name of Khalistan.
So look, first, I'm not so sure I believe Jagmeet's story. This is, he does competitive victimhood. There isn't a victim he hasn't tried to identify with, and he'd fabricate any story absolutely. Remember, he's still refusing to release the name of the abuser. There are these claims, but why would you protect your abuser? Come out with a name. He won't. Then we're told that the abuser is dead. How convenient. In which case there should be no problems naming him. But let's assume it's true. Remember, child molesters have a history of being molested by others. Almost a huge percentage of victims of child molestation end up becoming predators themselves. Not all, but a huge percentage, because they internalize things, they hide, they lie, there's anger they can't take out, and it translates into the need to repeat the same horrors onto other people. And his behavior, if you look at it, is exactly that of a bully, but not of a child molester. So that is why I have doubts that he's making up the story for, acquired victimhood where none exists. But no, Jagmeet isn't the problem. Justin Trudeau is the problem. Jagmeet is that problem finding other outlets for its creativity and its political influence. Jagmeet is the symptom, he's not the cause. Justin and his father and Jean Chrétien before him were the actual cause of the problem. And by the way, let's not whitewash the Conservative role in this. The Conservatives have gone along with this. They've never attacked the problem at the root. Even today, if you look at Pierre Poilievre's statement, he says, I was briefed on Indian foreign interference. It's very scary and real. And now what we're hearing is in the sworn, in pressers, you can lie. You can't lie under oath. Under oath, they're saying they don't have any evidence. So Pierre says, oh, I saw this. It was very disturbing. But then Trudeau is lying about Chinese political interference. He's trying to imply it was us. He's a known liar. So he's lying about Chinese political interference, but he's the paragon of honesty about Indian political interference. Even though to this date, we haven't seen a single shred of evidence. See, when the American claims came out, do you see anybody in India who questioned it? It was clear as night and day, and we said, yeah, boss, this is evidence. This isn't intel. This isn't unactionable intel. It's intel that's then passed the smell test with a judge who has then granted wiretapping permissions, which is then translated into usable evidence, and it's on the basis of that evidence we're acting. Here, you call things intel when it hasn't even passed the smell test of a judge. Imagine Justin Trudeau can't even get it authorized by a judge in Canada for wiretaps to translate intel into evidence.
So American evidence, of course, the Indian government seems to have already acted. Accused codenamed CC1 seems to have already been removed from service, and so on and so forth. That's what the report suggests. As far as Canada is concerned, I wonder how you see this unfold. Of course, you mentioned Chinese intervention. The biggest crisis Trudeau faces is, of course, of accusations of deep Chinese interference up to the police station level in Canada. And many people believe that he's trying to deflect this story onto the Indian story because the Chinese influence is so deep and so all pervasive in China, in Canada.
Not just deflect onto India, he's also trying to deflect it onto the Conservatives by implying that Pierre Poilievre had personally taken money from the Chinese. He's refusing to release the names in that case. In this case, he's refusing to release the evidence. There, he's refusing to release the names because he knows when the names come out, it'll all be his own party. But till the names are released, you can keep implying that, it was Conservatives and things like that, number one. Number two, he's facing an internal coup within his own party because he's deeply unpopular. And even that is based on the fact that the party was rock solid behind him, even when his personal popularity vis-a-vis Pierre Poilievre dropped dramatically, hit rock bottom. They gave him time to resuscitate it. Starting September 2023 with accusing India and lots of other stunts since then, he has not been able to resuscitate it. He's not been able to pull out the rabbit from the hat, which is why the entire leadership coup is happening. And there is the issue of, he can use any of this or a combination or mix of this to prolong his premiership by a few weeks, a few months, and the cost doesn't matter to him. In that sense, he's no different from Barack Obama. Remember, the 72 diplomats expelled after 79 diplomats expelled after Donald Trump won the election for election interference, for which we have still seen absolutely no proof of. And that story itself was based on the dossier, the Steele dossier and things like that, which have now been demonstrably shown to be hoaxes. And yet Barack Obama is considered a paragon of virtue. What consequences has he faced for that? What consequences have CNN, the New York Times, Washington Post, and Wall Street Journal faced for completely hobbling the Trump presidency? There should be criminal consequences for things like this. Obama should be in jail. The editors of these papers and TV outlets should be in jail. There is none. So Justin Trudeau will get away with this. Let's be very clear about that.
Happens next, Abhijit, while yes, in many ways, with this kind of complete breakdown of ties, Canada is the new Pakistan. It's harboring terrorists, it's encouraging them, and so on and so forth. But in a sense, Canada is not like Pakistan. We don't have business worth billions of dollars with Pakistan. There are millions of Indian students studying in Pakistan and so on and so forth, right? There are deep, engaging ties between India and Pakistan. Many people, India and Canada, many people today worry that, students who have gone to study there, how are they going to get, how are they going to get home? People who desperately need to go there or need to come back to India, what about their visa processes? There are lots of day-to-day nitty-gritties, month-to-month nitty-gritties that get stuck when diplomatic ties break down in this manner and shape and form. What happens next? Can this be salvaged? Will the crisis worsen?
Look, it's really the escalation. We didn't escalate this. It's constantly been the Canadians escalating this. Understand our leverage on them is significantly greater than their leverage on us. There are about 4 lakh students who they can deport. Okay, great. Remember, we have $56 billion in Canadian pension funds invested in India, which we can seize. All right. And I think that $56 billion is more than enough compensation for all the student families to recoup their wasted investment in education in Canada, plus more to seek an alternate education in the UK, Australia, or America if the need arises. $56 billion is a lot of money when you spread it over 400,000 students. So that isn't an issue. But Canada really needs to like I said, he doesn't care about the consequences. It's all I, me, myself. The personal interest is Canadian national interest.
Do you think Trudeau can recover from here? And the other question that I have, of course, is in the other thing we're seeing in Canada is that for the first time, non-Sikh Indians who are also in large numbers in Canada are, in a sense, waking up to a very ugly reality that they are caught in this crossfire between a belligerent Canadian government led by Justin Trudeau and completely mad terrorist fanatic Khalistanis on the other side. They are also organizing in some ways. Do you see counters to the Khalistanis and pressure on the Trudeau government by a lot of
Look, let's be very clear about this, Hindol.
non-Sikh Indians who live there?
Ever since 1192, Indians have proven themselves comprehensively unable to organize and resist. I would trust a pack of dogs to organize and resist better than I would a pack of 1.5 billion Indians, or say a minority of about a few million Indians in Canada. And this is the standard historical pattern for the last 1,000 years. Let's be very clear about this. So no. My real horror in all of this is that the CBC, the Canadian state broadcaster, got Gurratan Pannu, Gurpatwant Pannu on there to accuse Hindu Canadians of dual loyalties. First, leave aside the sheer irony of a man who wants to split up another country, which is not in Canada's foreign policy, because his loyalty lies to that other imaginary country, being invited, but then for him to be saying it and not be called out by the CBC. Who gave them the idea that platforming this man is a good idea?
Well, to answer, Abhijit, I dare say you and I have very similar suspicions on what the answer to that question could be. Now, here's the question. Since this sort of collusion is taking place, I mean, Gurpatwant Singh Pannu is an asset. Let's face it. I mean, Gurpatwant Singh Pannu is not doing this because he has some great ideological leanings. He might have ideological leanings, but he has support from extremely strong deep state actors. And Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, being platformed by CBC and calling other, Indians as, accusing them of having dual loyalties. He does the same thing in America, by the way. He accuses many Indians of having dual loyalties. And this is getting really, really vicious.
It is, but I fundamentally believe Gurpatwant Singh Pannu is a raw agent. He's a deep mole because every time he opens his mouth, he validates every single Indian accusation. Literally. He makes a better case for India than the Indian ambassador to DC, than the Indian ambassador to London, and the Indian ambassador to Canada.
See, since you mentioned ambassadors, I think a lot of people should know why India was so perturbed with what was happening in Canada. And again, perhaps some of it is starting to happen in other parts of the world. The sitting high commissioner's face was being put and videos were being shot of bullets being pumped into image of his face. Reports were coming up asking for the addresses of the High Commissioner and other officials, and bounties were being put on their head. There were constant attacks claiming that, they are murderers, there are all kinds of things. Essentially, the ground was being prepared to assassinate them.
Basically. And remember, this didn't happen in a vacuum. This has been happening for a long time. It has been tolerated. It violates Canadian free speech laws, which are determined by the Brandenburg Principle, which is a famous American case, Brandenburg versus the state of Ohio. And it is enshrined into Canadian jurisprudence. It is frequently used even in India. And what is the Brandenburg Principle of incitement? It does not cross the incitement threshold unless it is a specific weapon or threat against a specific individual or group. If I say, let's go around killing all Bengalis, it doesn't count. Okay. Why? Because I'm not saying how I'm not giving a plot. And bro, I'm Bengali. So, it's like I could be saying, it could be a suicide threat for all you know. So that doesn't qualify. But if I say, let us use hammers to smash the head of all Bengalis who don't wear specs, because spectacles are the identity marker of a true Bengali, it still doesn't cross the threshold. Because it's too numerous a group. You can't just go around doing that, right? That's a general call to violence. But if I say, Hindol Sengupta, I am going to burn you alive, this crosses the threshold.
Yes.
Because I've given a specific threat
Name.
Against a specific person.
Yes.
Or a group, Hindol
Yes.
and his viewers.
Yes.
Okay? It's the specificity that matters. This crosses every threshold of specificity. And they still don't act on it. Now imagine ANI saying the High Commissioner leaves the MEA is foreign political interference, but taking bullets and shooting it at the High Commissioner's face is not. Blowing up our plane is not. Covering up the crime is not. Trudeau making a statement to the farmers' protest is not.
It's madness. I have one last question for you, Abhijit, in on a similar line. One of the things that really seems to have offended India, and I think this will not go down well for a long, long time, is that Canada begged literally for a meeting in Singapore with NSA Doval. And the entire, conversation was leaked to an American newspaper. This has really gone down badly. And Trudeau is a repeat offender. Both you and I and others have seen this video of Xi Jinping chastising Trudeau for leaking private diplomatic conversations to the press, and Trudeau slinking away like a smack schoolboy. Now, this this betraying of confidence, and I believe Mr. Dover at the end of that conversation specially told his Canadian interlocutor this conversation never happened, and yet they went ahead and leaked all the details. I don't know, this is vitally immature.
I see it as a positive. I'll tell you why. Immature, we know the Canadians are immature. It seems that the entire system is a third world a system run by prepubescent kids, pubescent kids high on hormones at the moment. But what's telling is the contrast. They're leaking everything except the evidence or the intel. So, for a government that leaks like a sieve, why is no intel or even raw intel, why isn't it being leaked?
That's an excellent point. Well, this will go down badly. Abhijit Iyer-Mitra, we'll have to leave it at that. Thanks very much for talking us through the Canadian imbroglio. We'll see how this spreads in the days and months ahead. But as of now, complete collapse of diplomatic ties between Canada and India. And of course, this story will develop. Abhijit, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Hindol, as always.